U.S. scientists find possible universal monoclonal antibody coronavirus treatment. New York City and San Francisco declare public health emergency over monkeypox. See Something, Say Something campaign continues to haunt Muslims 20 years on. Bangladesh struggles with climate-driven internal migration. Covering of Kaaba changed to mark Islamic New Year. From Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana Siddiqui. Our top story tonight. The finding, published July 21st, comes as the world continues to grapple with the pandemic, which has killed over 6 million people. The new potential treatment also shows effectiveness against the severe acute respiratory syndrome, a coronavirus that emerged in China in 2002, the Middle East respiratory syndrome that appeared in Saudi Arabia in 2012, as well as common cold coronaviruses. On Saturday, authorities in New York City declared a public health emergency over rising monkeypox cases. New York City Mayor Eric Adams and Health Commissioner Ashwin Vasan said in a joint statement that as many as 150,000 city residents could be at risk of infection. Earlier, a state of emergency was declared in New York State and San Francisco. The declaration allows authorities to prepare and dedicate resources to prevent the spread of the virus. San Francisco has 261 cases out of about 800 in California and 4,600 nationwide, according to the San Francisco Department of Public Health. That accounts for almost 40% of the nearly 5,000 cases confirmed in the country. The World Health Organization has declared a global health emergency over the ongoing monkeypox outbreak. A retired lieutenant commander in the U.S. Navy has been found to be a leader of the Oath Keepers with a death list in relation to the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. Thomas Edward Caldwell has held top security clearance since 1979 and has also worked as a section chief for the FBI. On January 19th, law enforcement searched Caldwell's home and found the list, according to an indictment from the Justice Department. In a superseding indictment, Caldwell was charged with seditious conspiracy. In a new court filing, he revealed the names on the death list were Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss. They are two election workers who were so terrorized by supporters of former President Donald Trump that they went into hiding. CNN earlier this year reported that active military personnel and veterans are overrepresented among the first 150 people to be arrested in relation to the attack. That is more than double the proportion of servicemen and women and veterans in the adult U.S. population. It has been more than 20 years since the September 11th attacks, but for some, little has changed in the discrimination faced by Arabs and Muslims. A recent report by the Chicago-based Arab American Action Network highlights how city police and other agencies continue to racially profile Arabs, Muslims, and other minority residents in America's third largest city. The document says police agencies have criminalized Arabs and Muslims across Illinois under the guise of public safety. This is while vastly expanding local, state, and federal systems of racialized surveillance under the Department of Homeland Security's See Something, Say Something campaign. One example the document gave was when members of the public contacted the Illinois statewide Terrorism Intelligence Center about 4 men speaking Arabic while buying shoes. Another was of an African-American man who briefly visited a synagogue. The report was conducted in collaboration with the Policing in Chicago Research Group at the University of Illinois, Chicago. On Friday, Senator Bernie Sanders told voters in Pontiac, Michigan, that a vote for Representative Andy Levin would send a vital message to billionaires and corporate PACs that they cannot buy our democracy. That includes the anti-Palestinian American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC. Speaking days before the Democratic House primary in Michigan, Sanders said there is something profoundly wrong in our political system when a handful of billionaires through super PACs that spend millions of dollars try to defeat progressive candidates for Congress. Sanders and Levin, who are both Jewish, oppose the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land, a position which has made them targets of AIPAC. AIPAC and its allies are spending more than $4 million to defeat him. The group's PAC has called Levin's Two-State Solution Act, which he introduced last year, anti-Israel. The lobby group told supporters Levin represents the fringe wing of the Democratic Party in an email urging them to support his opponent, incumbent Haley Stevens. Virginia House Delegate Sam Rasool is leading a coalition of 30 legislators in calling on the Biden administration to take action for Asim Ghafoor. Ghafoor, who is from Virginia, was detained in the United Arab Emirates on July 14th and sentenced to 3 years in prison on July 16th. It is suspected that he was detained because he was the lawyer for Jamal Khashoggi, a Washington Post journalist allegedly murdered in 2018 by Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Critics say Ghafoor's arrest is retaliation for that. During his arrest, Ghafoor was denied due process and unable to speak with his legal counsel. He has also contracted COVID and is experiencing complications from the virus without access to adequate medical care, according to a statement by the group of legislators. Rasool and the coalition are calling on President Biden to take immediate action to right the wrong that has been done to Mr. Ghafoor. The climate crisis was linked to at least 26 deaths in Kentucky by Sunday as heavy rains triggered what Governor Andy Beshear called one of the worst, most devastating flooding events in the state's history. Climate experts say that as the climate warms, flash flooding will become more frequent and dangerous as rains become heavier during storms. Jeff Berardelli is a Florida-based meteorologist. He said the 9 inches of rain that fell in Hazard, Kentucky over a 12-hour period is an example of the kind of weather event which was extremely rare several decades ago, but is becoming increasingly common as carbon emissions continue to heat the planet. On Sunday, CNN host Fareed Zakaria slammed Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito for what he called a disgusting and scandalous speech last week. This was for criticizing foreign leaders who disagreed with his ruling on Roe v. Wade. Zakaria told Jim Acosta on CNN that Supreme Court justices are supposed to conduct themselves in a way that is above politics. This is particularly given they are unelected members with life tenure who can decide crucial decisions shaping the lives of millions of Americans. Zakaria, who hosts the CNN program Fareed Zakaria GPS, said Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts should make clear to Alito that his comments damaged not just himself, but the Supreme Court as well. We're bringing more news stories after the break, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Assalamu alaikum! Open up your eyes.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe, and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
It's Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah. Let's explore.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
The ornate silk cloth that covers the Kaaba at the Grand Mosque in Mecca used to be changed each year on the 9th or 10th day of Dhul Hijjah. This year, the covering, called the kiswa in Arabic, was changed on Saturday morning to mark the Islamic New Year. The covering is made of black raw silk, gold wire, and silver wire. Gold thread adorns the black silk, spelling out passages from the Quran, as well as phrases such as "No God but Allah" and "Glory to God" in the al-Tuluth style of calligraphy. Bangladesh is struggling to develop climate adaptation capacity to address the rush of climate-driven internal migration. The country is one of the most climate-vulnerable nations in the world. The situation is especially acute along the coastal belt of the country. Overall, the number of Bangladeshis displaced by the impact of climate change could reach 13.3 million by 2050. That will make it the country's #1 driver of internal migration, according to the World Bank. Iranian media reports that clashes erupted after the Taliban breached the borderline between Iran and Afghanistan. Fierce clashes erupted Sunday between Iranian border guards and Taliban forces in the region of Helmand in Iran's southeastern Sistan-Balochistan province. Afghan media, citing Taliban authorities, said at least one Taliban soldier was killed and another wounded. Taliban authorities have not commented on the cause of the firefight. Iran's Tasnim news agency said the clashes broke out after Taliban forces attempted to hoist their flag in an area that does not fall in Afghan territory. The two neighboring countries share a largely porous 559-mile border, which has often been a source of tension between them. Taliban forces have frequently engaged in border skirmishes with Iran and Pakistan. Researchers studying different social media platforms have identified how algorithms play a key role in the dissemination of anti-Muslim content, prompting wider hate against the community. U.S. Democratic Representative Ilhan Omar has often been a target of online hate, but much of the hate directed at her gets amplified through fake algorithm-generated accounts, the study has revealed. Lawrence Pintack, former journalist and media researcher, spearheaded the research in July 2021. He looked into the tweets mentioning the U.S. Congresswoman during her campaign. One of the crucial findings from the research was that half of the tweets involved overtly Islamophobic or xenophobic language or other forms of hate speech. Another was that out of the top 20 anti-Muslim amplifiers, only 4 were authentic. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
Welcome back. It's time for our in-depth analysis segment. Let's watch.
And now we move to Illinois, to Chicago, to discuss the release of an important and disturbing report about how the Muslim and Arab American community is being treated in that state. To discuss, let's bring on our special guest, Brother Mohammed Sankari, who is the lead organizer with AAAN, that's the Arab American Action Network. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Mohammed. How are you?
Wa alaikum salam. I'm doing well today. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for joining us to discuss this. Let's just start with a simple question. Tell us about the report. What's in it? What does it mean?
Yeah. So the Arab American Action Network, the organization that I work at, we just published a report which is free and accessible for everyone to download online. And I'll provide the link shortly. And this report is the culmination of really 7 years of work led by immigrant refugee women and youth aged 14 to 18, in which they were digging into what is going on, what are the tools that law enforcement is using to target our community. And we came to this thing that's called, this form that's called the Suspicious Activity Report. And it's through a federal program that's then passed down. This form it was kind of created that was then passed down to states to use. And it's really to standardize data collection and gathering for all levels of law enforcement. This is everything from, in Chicago, we call it the CTA, so like the train, the mass transit cops, all the way up to the FBI and ICE. And they're using these forms to collect a massive amount of data on our communities, and then to process this data in these data warehouses called fusion centers, and there's 2 in the state of Illinois. And then that data is being then, first and foremost, it's being stored with the FBI for a minimum of 35 years in their eGuardian database, even if the analysts themselves say there's no credible threat. And then from there, it's being made accessible to all levels of law enforcement, including ICE, Department of Homeland Security, et cetera, et cetera. And so our report is digging into suspicious activity reports and really proving that it's being a tool, that it is a tool of racial surveillance, racialized surveillance that's targeting Arabs and more broadly, the Muslim communities or Muslim identified communities in Illinois.
So give us some examples, Mohammed, of stories that you uncovered of people being reported to this database. Why were they being reported? Give us some examples.
Yeah, I think, it was like, there's so many egregious examples, honestly, it's hard to just pick a few. One of them that sticks out in my mind, because I work with youth, I work with high school youth. There is a young student who is a Syrian American who goes to a suburban high school, who went and talked to his counselor just because he was distraught about the civil war in Syria and said that he wasn't going to be able to see his grandparents. And the counselor then tells the on-staff law enforcement officer at school, who then reports this to the Illinois State Police, who creates a suspicious activity report, and then actually follows up with the family. And we know this because it's written in the report, starts asking the family about what their affiliation to ISIS is and what they think and feel about ISIS. Understandably, the father, I believe, who is reported in this report to have answered the phone, was not interested in having this conversation, is like unclear as to why it's happening, and rushes the officer off the phone. And they then use that to say there's further suspicion that the father didn't want to have this conversation about what his connection to ISIS was. And all of this happened because a young person, 14, 15, 16, whatever they are, in high school, who was feeling distraught, went and talked to an adult who they should have been able to trust. And all of this snowballed out of control. That's one that was particularly egregious. I think another one to me that sticks out in my mind is there was a college student who had, there was a backpack that was recovered on campus. Someone forgot their backpack. The state police go through the contents of the backpack and find a sticker promoting the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel. And they use this as a basis to question the student and write a report about, could this be suspicious? Is there something deeper going on here? And a number of things that they start to dig into because of the student's political beliefs, and that their political beliefs, specifically promoting the human rights of Palestinians and speaking out against the Israeli apartheid and occupation. And the list really goes on and on and on. We could sit all day and I could recount the stories, and more of them are available in our report.
So let me ask this, Mohammed, how did you get a hold of this data? Because what we found at the federal level is the government is very secretive about what exactly they're collecting and what they're doing with this massive information. How did you get a hold of this data and get it into the light of the public?
Yeah, I think you can appreciate this, knowing now that I know that you're an attorney. And we got it because of some really brilliant attorneys from the Community Activism Law Alliance in Chicago. That's their name at the time. Now they're called Beyond Legal Aid. And our attorneys, we filed a number of FOIAs, very well, if I may say so myself, very well crafted FOIAs. And unsurprisingly, probably to you and to many people listening, the police said no. This is privileged information, national security exemptions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we sued. And our attorneys, again, I think did a very good job. We're very appreciative of them. They were able to push and say that there is public interest in knowing this information, and they can't just keep hiding behind the idea of national security. We were able then to release secure the release of over 200 suspicious activity reports. Obviously, many of them were still heavily redacted, but even with the ones and the information that was not redacted, we were then able to prove our thesis here, which is that it's being used to target our communities.
So let me ask you this, Mohammed. So we've got this information, you know about what law enforcement doing. Now, what do you want them to do about it? Are you asking for this database to be shut down, or are you just putting this information out there so that others can take appropriate action? Well, what do you want to see done about this information?
Yeah, the AAAN, what we say is we're not a research organization. We do this research for a broader goal, which is we do community organizing. And what we believe is, without a stop, without any preconditions, the program of suspicious activity reports, first and foremost, needs to be ended in the state of Illinois. It is without a doubt, it is being used to racially profile communities of color in the state of Illinois. The data proves it, their own data. This is not my own conjecture. These are based on the reports from the Illinois State Police and the Chicago Police Department. So with that being said, suspicious activity reports immediately need to be ended in the state of Illinois. I'll take it a step further and say we believe that the very function of the fusion centers, which are these data sharing warehouses again, this raises very, very large red flags in our minds for people's civil liberties and civil rights and right to privacy. And we don't believe that the way that the fusion centers are functioning should be allowed to function. There should not be unlimited amounts of data sharing without any reasoning other than law enforcement agencies want more and more information. That is not enough. People's right to privacy, people's civil rights and civil liberties trump the government's want to collect unlimited amounts of data on us.
So, Mohammed, I know you all just had a tragedy in the state of Illinois just yesterday with this mass shooting, which was not perpetrated by an Arab American or a Muslim American, but a young white male, as numerous other terrorist attacks in our nation have been. Do we know what the breakdown of people is in the database in terms of their demographics? Arab, Black versus white, et cetera. Is there any indication that minorities are overly accounted for in that database? And what do you say to law enforcement agencies who say, well, look, we just need to, we're not doing anything with the information, we're not arresting them. We just need information so we can stop mass killings or mass shootings, so we can connect the dots. So what do you say to them in response to that argument?
Yeah, first and foremost, I think based on our analysis of the suspicious activity reports, the ones that are being processed by the Illinois State Police were about 53% of those reports were filed against people who were listed as Arab, Middle Eastern, Muslim, or olive-skinned. Those were the terms that we were able to pull out. In the Chicago Police Department's Fusion Center, it was like 49.3 or 49.6% of reports. So we're talking between both Fusion Centers, right about 50% of all of these reports being filed are specifically about Arab, Middle Eastern, Muslim, South Asian. If we then build it out further and say communities of color in general, people who are identified, in addition, I don't want to separate, obviously, I'm not saying that there's obviously a crossover between Black communities and Muslim communities. There's Black Muslim communities, obviously Muslims who are Black. So there's that in the reports as well, right? One of the SARs is of a Black Muslim woman who was taking photos. But when we look at all communities of color, we're now talking about 78% of the suspicious activity reports that are being filed. People of color are not 78% of Illinois state population. Arabs are not even 1.5% of the state's population. And so again, proves without a doubt that this is racialized surveillance under the guise of quote unquote keeping people safe. To your latter point about the horrific tragedy that just happened, that was again carried out by a white male. And I'm not sure of his ideological motives, but what we do know is that he was a Trump supporter. And it's probably not a far reach to say that this man may be a white nationalist as well, which is a common theme in a lot of these horrific attacks. One of the things that has been brought up, I think, is to say, well, why don't we have counterterrorism programs that focus on the terror threat of white American males? And I just want to caution us in this, because what we've seen time and time again is that an expansion of terrorism budgeting or an expansion of terrorism programs, no matter what they're under the guise of, inevitably reinforce the existing racial profiling systems that exist today. And we know that the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security and ICE and the local police are targeting communities of color. And so pumping money in and pushing to expand these programs in hopes of catching these radical fringe right-wing Nazis and racists that are murdering people, I believe is the wrong approach. And what we actually need to do, truly, honestly, is begin to think about what is at the root cause of this issue that's happening in the United States. Why is this a uniquely American problem in which we have massive amounts of gun violence and that's being perpetrated? And the answers to that are not just counterterrorism programs. The answers to that are sociological. These are like sociological questions we need to answer. There are economic solutions, there are social solutions, and also I think there are solutions in terms of understanding who and how people are able to get guns and what it means, including law enforcement officers, frankly, what it means for people who have violent histories, including law enforcement officers, to be able to continue to buy weapons to kill people with.
So last question for you, Mohammed, any reaction? So I know the report just came out. Any reaction so far from local political leaders? Do you expect, for example, the city of Chicago, which you would think would be somewhat responsive to the concerns of minority groups, any expectation that you'll see some positive action or at least some investigation into how this database is being used, abused, misused?
Yeah, we believe that that our role is to force them into action. You would hope that political leaders would be responsive to their constituents, but we've seen time and time again, especially in Illinois and especially in Chicago, especially when it comes to policing, that our political leaders and the established governing system will bend over backwards to defend police officers in their most egregious and horrific abuses. And Chicago was the torture capital of the United States, the police torture capital of the United States by John Burge, the Midnight Crew, and others in the 80s. And we're still going, to this day, 40 years later, we still don't have everyone who was tortured by John Burge out of prison, even though we know that they were tortured. So that being said, we believe that power will concede nothing without a demand, and a mass mobilized community to exercise their rights to demand that we shut down suspicious activity reports and we really change the nature of policing as a whole in this country.
Mohammed, I want to thank you so much for your time and for sharing details about this report with us. Where can people go to download and read the report?
They can go to AAAN.org/CERP-report, and that's Campaign to End Racial Profiling-report. If that's hard to remember, they can also just go to AAAN.org, and there should be a link right there on our homepage.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mohammed. We appreciate it, and we look forward to having you back to discuss next steps in response to this groundbreaking report. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.